Okay, alright, here we go everyone. Alright, another video today. Gonna be doing some comics. I'm actually gonna get started on this thing. Yeah, just gonna be going right on the paper here. I got everything set up. I got my thumbnails here. You can see like the edge of the thumbnails right around here, but I've got them open, so I'm looking at them. If you saw the other videos, I mean, one was just character design, but in the first video, I did all these thumbnails and stuff so I could get started with the comic. So here I am. I'm going to get started. A lot of stuff I want to talk about. Not sure all what I'm going to get to, but I'm going to start out by making some really light guidelines for the panels. You may not even be able to see them that well because I just want to keep them super light. I'm just going to block out where I kind of want the panels to go. And it's nice to be able to use this kind of grid. Let's see if I line the paper up. You know, to get these, they don't have to be perfect, but having them somewhat close to where I want them, that's the idea. So I may, you know, these are basically just guidelines. I may change these later, or you know, who knows. But basically, this is kind of where I want things to go in accordance to my thumbnail here, which you can't see, but I basically got like a biggish panel on top here, a smaller one in the middle, and then a somewhat larger one on the bottom. So we'll see how it goes. I did want to talk about drawing comics traditionally. There's so many different ways to make comics, and everybody, I think, has kind of a different way of doing it. I mean, there's this kind of like industry accepted way of, you know, drawing everything and then inking it and then coloring it and then inserting all the speech bubbles and stuff like that. I don't like to do that. I like to do everything by hand, straight on the paper. I don't like to fuss around with digital stuff more than I have to. So if I'm able to do everything on paper, I'll do everything on paper. So I'm gonna block out the top of this panel right here. I've got my guidelines here at the bottom. I don't know exactly how low I'm going to make the panel go, but I know where I want the sides, obviously, and it's like right in the middle of the paper. For this comic, I'll probably end up doing all traditional. I mean, not probably, I'm like definitely going to, but you know, I'm probably going to do it like actual size, like how big I'm drawing it here is probably how big I'm going to print it, or at least scan it. It's hard to say exactly where this comic is going to go at this moment, but I want to release it digitally at least, because printing, there's a lot more logistics and stuff that go into that, but doing it online and just, you know, putting the files together and letting you guys download and read it, that's the best way for me to do it in my current situation, because printing costs money, a lot of money, and you know, that's not always the best choice in the climate where things are at now. You can make stuff and release it online. Like you don't necessarily need to print it. If I end up doing like convention circuits and stuff like that, then I definitely print it to have something physical to sell. But as much as that's something I want to do this year, we'll see. I mean, I just don't know if I'm at that point yet. I used to get a lot of questions, you know, are you going to be at conventions, are you going to do this or that? And I always really wanted to, but I've never really had enough stuff to actually like put together to sell, if that makes sense. Because it costs money to get a table at a convention, and if you have stuff to sell, you can make that money back. If you don't have stuff to sell, then I don't know what I'd be doing. So we've got this kind of like wall of flesh, I guess we can just call it that, up here. And I've always wanted my comics to be like more casual in the way that I draw them, because like there's so much like planning and sizing and stuff that goes into making like a comic in like industry style, like mainstream standards, and I just really, I don't know, I kind of reject those standards. I want to make it in my way, and I want to make it how I want it to be, and that's what I'm going to do. So if you like to make comics by those industry guidelines, standards, then more power to you, you know, go for it. But this is what I like to do. And, you know, hopefully, if nothing else, we can start a dialogue about, you know, what it takes to actually make a comic and just put it online without having to do all this like crazy fancy stuff. So I like where the sizing of this panel is right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and block out the bottom. As you can see, it's not an even box whatsoever. It doesn't have to be. I can do whatever the heck I want, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So we got Cole trapped under here, and just creating the feeling that this is like pushing down on her is what I want right now. So he's kind of in this like awkward position. So I've been doing those tiny comics in that little notebook and drawing them all in pencil, and I've been having so much fun that I just wanted to jump in and do something in that style, in that vein of just drawing everything in pencil, because it feels so good to do it that way. I just really like it. So just gonna jump into it, and she's got her. I talked about this in the last video. She's got her like shield gauntlet thing here, poly shield. That's gonna project a shield to protect her from the explosion that's gonna happen. If you watch the video about thumbnails, I kind of talked about the scene, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on. So definitely want to make sure that comes across visually, because I want this comic to be very visual heavy and keep the dialogue to a minimum, as much as possible anyway. Dialogue is essential in comics, but the nice thing about comics is you can show a lot without saying a lot, and I think that's really important to think about, because it's not a book in the sense that you have to read everything, and the more reading you end up having to do, the more the art kind of takes a back seat. So the more you can do with the art, the more story you can tell just with the art on its own, the better, in my opinion, anyway. So got this cool gauntlet thing here. I'm kind of designing it on the fly. Like I've drawn it roughly a couple times with varying degrees of detail, and I have settled on the idea that I like it with lower detail, because not only is it easier to draw, but it's easier to remember. I'm not having to look up like reference or anything like that. I don't know what I'm going to do on the top here for that design, so I'll leave it and think about it in a minute. So let's just keep drawing this through here. So I hope you're all doing well. I kind of reached this point where in my videos where I don't really know what to say. It happens every time, so I kind of just go to like, hey, I hope you're doing alright. How's the weather? You know, small talk, blah blah blah. But I just want to say I love you guys. Like this, you guys keep me going. You know, this has been this YouTube. I didn't know exactly, how much I was going to be into it and how much people were going to respond to it. And I was kind of, gauging how much work I'd want to put into it based on that. And the feedback's been really good, but more importantly, I mean, I do want to say thank you for that. Like, thanks for watching the videos and commenting and doing all that. I think I'm getting close to like almost 1,000 subscribers now, so that's awesome. So thanks a lot, guys. Like you really make it fun and worthwhile for me. And most importantly, not that you guys aren't important, but I am having fun doing it. And as I've said, if you've watched other videos of mine or anything like that, like I always say that having fun when doing art is like the most important thing, because if you're not having fun, then what are you doing? Like it's work. Like art by nature is an enjoyable thing, and like yeah, it should feel like work at some point, like you should be working for your craft. Like that's part of it, but it should be fun. It should be enjoyable at the same time. So that's important to me, having fun, and I hope it's important to you too. And talking about like the industry standard of comics and like how people do things and stuff like that, like I think that's really important, because everybody looks at mainstream comics and be like, oh, I want to make comics, and like this is the mainstream, so this is kind of the formula I subscribe to, or I should subscribe to. And I don't think that's the case. Indie comics are big, and they're getting bigger, and the landscape is changing. I think that, or if you were to ask me, I would say that mainstream comics are dropping in popularity. And maybe that's just my perspective, because I don't read any mainstream comics. Like there's nothing that I keep up with. And when I was younger, there was a lot of stuff that I kept up with. I read a lot of different comics. Even up until like a couple years ago, I was keeping up with like Hellboy and a bunch of other stuff. And I don't anymore. Not only because like I want to make my own stuff, but because I'm just not as interested. Mainstream comics can be very formulaic at times, and I like to break from the formula. I like to do new and different things, and most of the comics I've been into have been indie stuff, stuff that's been produced by real people. Not to say that like mainstream comics aren't produced by real people, because they absolutely are. I work with many of them, and they're good friends of mine. But this is where I think comics are going. I think comics, are in the future going to be made by individuals or small teams of independent creators rather than large studios, because while like the Marvel movie craze and everything has kind of, I think, brought a lot of new people into comics, the people who have been into comics for a long time, I feel like, are thirsting for something new. Myself included. I speak for myself, and I'm making speculations as to how other people may feel, but that may not necessarily be the truth. So don't take what I say as fact. That's just how I feel about it. If you want to take what I say as fact, that's fine. I'm not gonna stop you. But just something to think about. So she's good and trapped under here. The feeling of this pressing down, I think, is I really hit on it well. That was really important for me, to make that very clear. That this is like she's being squished. Like she's like, rah. Man, it's being squished by this fleshy thing. That's not only gross but pretty scary. So you probably already know if you've watched any of my other stuff, but if you haven't, you are probably noticing that I don't do any sort of like sketching or anything beforehand. And yeah, I did thumbnails, and that's one thing. Let's just get a general idea of like placement stuff. And if you haven't watched that other video, go watch it. It's got some good information, and especially if you're interested in making comics of your own, like maybe it'll help give you a fresh perspective on what you're able to do, and how you can break from the mold of mainstream comics and do something original and fresh. And another thing I wanted to talk about is like writing, and I may not talk about it too much in this video, but writing is very important. Now, is it always necessary? No. But I think what is very important, more than like writing everything down on paper, is having a really good mental idea of your story. Now, I spend a lot of time driving and stuff like that. I have to drive pretty far for my actual job, and I spend a lot of time thinking about my stories, like while I drive. And that's just one example, but like while I'm doing other stuff as well, while I'm doing dishes or going to the bathroom, I'm always, not always, but I often try to think about my stories and like where they're gonna go and like story points and stuff like that. And if I have really good ideas or big complex ideas, I always write them down so I don't forget. But having that in my mind constantly helps me develop my story, even when I'm not sat at my desk or I'm not able to sit at my desk and just write. You know what I mean? Because it's hard to find time to sit down and write and do scripts and stuff like that. So the more you can build it in your head in time that you are doing something else or wouldn't be able to sit down and actually like jot this stuff down, the stronger your story is going to be. The more you think about it, the more you're going to be motivated to create it as well. A big part of making comics for me is motivation. I don't really have that many comics that are like out in the world, and a lot of that for me is a combination of not having enough time and not having motivation. I take a lot of commissions and stuff, so to get by and make the money I need to survive. So every time I do a commission, that's time I'm not doing comics, and every time I do like anything else, that's not time I'm not doing comics. So honestly, like making these videos is going to be a great way for me to make time to make comics, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. And let's smear in a little bit here so we get a good sense of depth. This is not. I'm not going to be like shading this entire comic because I don't want to. But doing just a little bit, just a little touch like that, is already helping to create the depth, seeing that this is, pushing down all around her, and separating the background from the figure as well, while not having to draw out a ton of little tiny details and do a whole bunch of shading, because I don't want to spend the time on that. Like, pretty much all of my stories are crafted as long-term continuing arcs. I like, when I write my stories, to write like one main arc, and to think about it in terms of like a TV show, that would be like the first season, right? The main arc that I'm always thinking about in my mind is the first season of the comic. And if the comic, goes through the first season and it comes to a logical end, and it's honestly not that popular, like, maybe I won't continue it. But it has a logical end at the end of that first season, so I could end it there if I wanted to. But I always have like long-term stories in mind, so that if the comic does really well and I want to continue it long-term, then I can. Like, those ideas are already in place. I don't have to like rewrite anything or anything like that. Like, it's all there, ready to go. So she's trapped under there. I think that panel's looking pretty good. For this first episode, I'm just doing the first panel, because I'm trying to keep the video length a little bit shorter this time. But as you can see, like, we're well on our way. Like, we got one panel in. It's looking really good. To toot my own horn, it's okay to be proud of your stuff. I really like this panel. I think it's really great. So a good, strong start. The first panel is really important because it's going to be the first thing people see. I feel like I don't really need to explain too much on top of that. But throughout the videos, I'll continue drawing on here. If I have stuff to talk about, I'll just talk about it while I draw. It's not always going to be pertinent to exactly what I'm drawing, but as long as I'm drawing and talking, I think we'll have a video for you guys to watch. So thanks for tuning in. I mean, this has been super fun lately. I just want to say thank you again for all the amazing support. And I'll keep up with this because I'm really passionate about this story and the way I'm doing this comic and recording it, and kind of like I mentioned a while ago before I actually started doing these comic videos, chronicling my comic process. I think to kind of give you an insight to my brain and how my brain works and how I make things, and hopefully that can help you make some cool stuff too. So hopefully you're liking it. If you've got feedback or anything, drop it in the comments. I read everything and I try to respond to as much as possible, but I do read it all. So yeah, thanks for coming this time. I'll get another one up for you guys to watch hopefully pretty soon, and hopefully I can keep up this this pace of videos because I think it's been good so far. It's been good for me, and you guys seem to be liking it. So awesome. That's all I got to say this time. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.